Check, check, 1 2 1 2. Check, check, 1 2 1 2. What's up, everyone? If you're watching the replay, go ahead and skip this. Go ahead and skip this countdown timer if you're watching the replay. Don't forget to say hi in chat once you join. Don't forget to say hi in chat once you join. If you're watching this on Twitter or Facebook, please join us on the chat on YouTube. Hi, Dana. I can't hear you.
Hold on.
Oh, I can hear you now.
Oh, okay, cool.
Perfect.
I don't have a microphone outside of my laptop at the moment, so I hope my sound is okay.
It does sound good. It sounds good.
Okay, cool. Just let me know if it gets echoey or faint or anything.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm still working on getting a nice camera and set up for home, since it seems like we're going to be doing this for a long time now.
All right, let me go ahead and get things ready here. Is there a way you can maybe move your laptop camera or your camera kind of down a little bit so your head can almost go
down?
You're right there. Perfect. Or a little high. You can do it a little higher.
How's that?
A little higher.
A little higher?
Right there. Perfect. Yes.
Is
Beautiful.
that good?
Beautiful. Love it.
Okay. All right.
We got 2 minutes. 2 minutes. I see some people in the chat. Please say hi in the chat. So I'll go over the news first, and then about 8 to 10 minutes or so, and then you could chat in the chat room or anything like that. But
awesome.
I'll introduce you right in
the I'll mute for now then.
Okay.
Hey, time to get it started, no delay, let's work. Wanna see you be an SEO expert. Paul Andre de Vera, steady dropping knowledge. Over 15 years in the game, so he knows all about it. Master the art of SEO, you will be amazed. Time to get your brand off page to on page. Dropping knowledge, legendary for sure. Whether you're just getting started or self-employed entrepreneur. Yeah, let's go. Subscribe to the SEO video show. Hey.
Hey, welcome to another episode of the SEO video show where SEO is alive and fun. My name's Paul Andre de Vera, aka Dre, and I curate SEO videos released within the past week into about 1 minute clips. My favorite part of the show is when I get to introduce my guest, and my guest this week is Dana Tan, the head of SEO at Under Armour. But before we get started, I want to say hi to everyone in chat. I see Kayla, Freddie, Kenneth, Elizabeth, welcome. And hello to everyone watching the replay. Please don't forget to hit the like, subscribe, and notification bell so you get notified when we go live. Now let's get on with the show.
Now, index bloat is one of those problems that...
This is Ted DiBiase, the $1 Million Man. Why do SEOs love the farmer's market? Lots of organic content.
First off with Google News, the newly branded Google Search console is now Google Search Central, the channel formerly known as Google Webmasters. They just released a video on SEO for government and authority websites, which is pretty much SEO 101 for any website, really. Another thing that just got rebranded was the Google Webmasters Hangout. The first Google Search Central branded Hangout went live this past week. Same format, different name. Episode 10 of the Search Off the Record podcast was just released this past week. If you're not listening to this podcast, you should. There's a lot of nuggets that get dropped within the conversation between Gary, John, and Martin. Let's listen to how AMP is indexed in this last episode.
AMP, unless it's canonical, basically standalone AMP, we don't index it. And I know that that's a shocker, but essentially AMP is just an alternate format that we present for searchers in our search results for our users. If it's standalone AMP, basically canonical AMP, then we will just treat it as HTML and it gets indexed potentially just like an HTML page would be indexed. And then what else do we do with AMP?
We badge it in the search results, right?
Yes, but that's just a special badge that we apply to AMP.
I mean, people are hypothesizing that this is also like a ranking thing, but it isn't, as far as I'm aware.
No, AMP is not on its own a ranking signal.
Right, cool.
There you have it, AMP. AMP is a special case. I mean, I always tend to say like Google loves Google. I mean, I love AMP. You should look into it. You get special badges, like they said, but it's not a ranking factor, but definitely check it out. More on indexing this week is on Google Passage Indexing. Here's a great overview of what passage indexing and how you can help Google get your passages ranked.
This is gonna help users, webmasters with long form content to rank a piece of their content rather than having like 10 different smaller articles about the topic.
Yes, pretty much. That's the core. Like you're basically pointing out the core. While I'm not super excited about us framing it originally as passage indexing, it is actually a ranking change.
Here, but this is actually not changing how you index content. It's just changing how you rank content that's already indexed in your database.
Yeah, pretty much.
Passage ranking, right?
Yeah, I would call it passage ranking.
Can I somehow improve my rankings in that passage indexing, passage ranking, or is it something that happens like you understand the content regardless of the markup?
It's pretty much that. I mean, with any kind of content, you want to have some semantic and some structure in your content so that it's easier for automated systems to understand the structure and the kind of like the bits and pieces of your content. But even if you would not do that, we would still be able to say like, oh, this part of the page is relevant to this query, where this other piece of your page is not as relevant to this query.
There you have it. Using schema will always help out with other things, passage ranking and stuff like that. So schema is something you should definitely do. And let's see here. Hey, wait, hold on. Yeah. Oh, hold on. Let me patch you right in real quick.
Hey, Dre, how are you doing? Thanks for having me on here very briefly. I wanted to share something new and exciting, at least I'm very excited about it, that I'm launching. I'm going to be starting a newsletter, an email newsletter, specifically on SEO for Google News. I've been very privileged to work with some of the largest media companies in the world over the last few years, and I realized there's not a lot of information out there on SEO for news publishers. So I want to start sharing what I've learned over the years and all the experiences and insights that I've gathered on optimizing news websites for visibility in Google News, top stories, Google Discover, etc., etc. So this is a new newsletter. You can sign up via my website, polemicdigital.com, or via Substack, which is newsseo.substack.com, for anyone interested in optimizing for Google News. Thanks very much. Back to you, Dre.
Thank you, Barry. Thank you for that. If you want to check it out, it's SEOforGoogleNews.com. He has a great newsletter that's coming out. Check it out. He's an expert in the game. He's been doing this for quite some time and for news publishers. What companies look for when hiring an SEO expert? As you know, my goal for this channel is to get more people involved into the SEO industry. Here are some traits you need to work on when getting your first SEO job.
Traits when hiring someone.
They have an established process. Now, if this SEO consultant doesn't want to tell you what they're doing, it could be a red flag. Or they could be potentially just putting out spam, and that's not going to look good for your reputation. Or at the end of the day, they could be doing absolutely nothing, just collecting checks from you. So the next quality to look for, are they providing monthly reports or progress updates? That is so important because everyone wants that ROI. You want a return on what you're putting into this. Check-ins on a monthly basis, letting you know what has been done and what we could do to actually make things go better in the future.
Yeah, things like detailed traffic stats and conversion analytics. Those are going to be really important with helping you see whether or not their SEO efforts are actually paying off.
So the next quality, they provide training for your team. Now, it's important for you to know that everyone is on the same page. So everyone in your organization can get some training from this SEO consultant. Also, you get to learn more about your SEO consultant in that way.
The last thing to consider is take a look at their website and their SEO experience. Is that something that you would be proud to have?
There you have it. Some few traits that you should definitely work on before you get or when you're looking for your first SEO job. Ross Simmonds talks about content marketing strategy I always recommend to implement at companies I work with. Let's check it out.
You look at Moz, you look at Salesforce, you look at HubSpot, a lot of them have been able to establish a lot of traffic by simply creating glossary sections of their websites. That's something that as an SEO, you should be able to look at and say, how can I apply this to my industry? If you're a coffee company, maybe you create a glossary around the different phrases that are interesting to coffee. If you are a plant company and you're selling plants, create a glossary section on your site that is dedicated to the bonsai trees, to the tulips, to any other plant. I'm not a plant guy, but like a pineapple, I think.
There you have it. Other similar ideas I've recommended are creating customer directories on your clients' websites. This is a great gateway pages to get more traffic into your clients' websites. Okay, with content, you need backlinks. John from Ignite Visibility gives us his top ways to build backlinks in 2021. Let's check it out.
When you look at this entire list of ways to build links for SEO going into 2021, newer and different ways that are totally allowed by Google and improve your digital presence management, you can see that you should definitely be looking at journalist responses. You should definitely be doing unlinked mentions. You should probably be doing industry studies. You definitely should be doing awards.
He goes over 11 few things. Those were just the top ones he mentioned, where it was journalistic response, unlinked mentions, industry study, and awards were the top 4 there. A question I get all the time is, how long does SEO take? Chris from A Nerd's World gives a fun answer. Check out his response.
First and foremost, with SEO, you got to learn to eliminate time from the equation. Stop predicting how long things would take. It's weird. It's only SEO that you do this. Like it's a ridiculous question that actually doesn't deserve a real answer, because SEO is a competitive sport. It's one of the most competitive sports in the world. There are billions of websites and billions of people, owners of those websites, all competing for very competitive keywords. So how long will it take you to rank? Who knows? Like, who are you competing against? How long have you had a website? How good is your website? How good is the content that you have on your website? Stop worrying about how long things are going to take. And I'm talking to a lot of you. I see the comment, Chris, I'm learning SEO. How long until I'm in first place? Who cares? Eliminate time from the equation.
I love thinking that SEO is a sport. It's a great sport. It's fun. With all jokes aside, it really depends. I'd say a minimum of at least 3 weeks for longer tail, less competitive keywords, and it just gets longer from there. SEM Rush just had 5 hours of technical SEO training, and it was released this week, and which is, what my guest specializes in. But before we get to her, let's listen to this insightful clip from the webinar by Dwayne Forrester.
For a machine to be able to pull a passage, a segment of a conversation off a page and know that that is the right answer for your question, that's pretty advanced level stuff. And yet, almost every query that you run, even branded queries where you've expressly stated what you want, have a level of ambiguity built into them that requires Google to then populate, people also asked, for things that are not related to the brand or are showing a competitor's brand. Because did you actually mean the brand, or were you using the brand to mean a product type? And Google doesn't know that on top. So it needs to ask the question to learn, to figure that out. And along the way, it's also using you and your input to train its machine learning systems to hopefully get smarter over time. So there's a massive amount to this. You know, the core concept of a knowledge graph, I sincerely hope people adopt this and they understand it. SEOs, you absolutely have to understand what a knowledge graph is, how to build it, how to utilize it, and how the engines are using these things in the future. Because this is going to define search over our next decade. No doubt in my mind.
There you have it, knowledge graphs. Learn all about knowledge graphs and entities. There's a great book out there on entities, and it's something Bill Slawski mentions all the time. He writes about entities in his patents reports on his blog. Okay, now the favorite part of my show, the time I get to introduce my guest. And everyone in chat, feel free to ask questions during our conversation. I encourage it. This show is to help us all become better SEOs, and we can't get better unless we ask questions. So please go ahead and ask. Let me go ahead and get things set up here. Dana is a classical musician and veteran of SEO industry, also a real veteran. She graduated from Full Sail University with a Master of Science degree in Internet Marketing. She has been doing enterprise SEO level for 18 years and specializes in technical and e-commerce SEO, and is currently the head of SEO for Under Armour in Baltimore. Please welcome Dana Tan.
AMP, unless
for a machine to be able to
basically standalone AMP.
Dana, what's up? How are you doing today?
I'm great. Hey, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you just fine. Hold on. Let me make sure I can get you correct. Let me get you on here. Yeah, I can hear you just fine. How are you doing?
I'm great.
Actually,
good. Thanks for the intro. That was awesome.
Of course, of course. Okay, so I want to talk about a few things. I mean, you have been doing conferences. I mean, there's like this huge technical SEO conference that was gone on there for 5 years. And 5 years, going on for 5 hours. And I was wondering, like, you spoke at a couple this year, right?
Yes. Yeah. I've done SMX West. I did that right before everything closed down. So I felt very fortunate to do that and actually be with real people. And then Crawl to Convert, which is a conference hosted by Botify, which I went to in person last year, but did virtually, of course, this year. And I think there's another one in there somewhere. I'm forgetting, but
before all these conferences, right? How did you get into SEO? You got to tell us the journey of like how did you get fascinated with SEO and led to like actually speaking at conferences.
Yeah. So I, in a previous life, was a classical musician, a classically trained musician, and I was in one of the special bands in DC. I left the service. I was in the Army, and I taught university level music for a while. And while I was doing that, I started tinkering around. I bought a website. I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't know what HTML was. I had never touched Excel in my life. I was a musician. I didn't know any of that stuff. And I just started playing around with it. And I started doing HTML emails. So I taught myself HTML. And I had a membership site that was fairly competitive. This was back in the day. This was years ago. So probably 18 years ago. I was doing everything. So I was doing paid search back in the days when paid search was called Overture. That will really date me for your audience. Before AdWords was ever a thing. Google bought Overture and then rebranded it AdWords. I was doing email marketing. So I was a well-rounded digital marketer. But there were no training programs. There was no one within 500 miles of where I lived in the middle of nowhere in Pennsylvania to teach me SEO. So it was some was trial and error. There was a little bit. Rand Fishkin had just started his whiteboard Fridays, were like a cheesy whiteboard propped up on a chair behind him back in those days. And so there were a few folks like Rand out there doing some tutorials and videos and things like that. And then I heard about this program at Full Sail University, which was sort of its first of its kind, and this was back in 2009. And still to this day, there are precious few degree programs that even incorporate very much digital marketing at all. And most of it's outdated information anyway, or it's taught by people who haven't actually been out there in the industry. And so, they let me in this master's degree program at Full Sail with no business. All my prerequisites were in classical music, but somehow they had faith in me that I could do it, and they let me in the Master of Science program. And I thought, well, I'll find out, like, if I can really do this or if I'm a total disaster. And I found out that I probably could have taught the SEO module in that. I knew way more than I thought I did.
Mm-hmm.
And that was very validating. It was also a great way to make connections. It was the first time I started talking to people who did something close to what I did. And I still maintain some of those connections today, which is really cool. And then I moved to the West Coast. I was hired away from my company by a competitor. By the way, I talked my way into my first SEO job. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I was just good at convincing someone that I could do it. And the first company I worked for was a small e-com company.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a good place to learn. I could make mistakes. And one of the first mistakes I made, I honestly still think I was doing a good thing. I think at the time it just took Google a while to digest things. It's much faster now, but I went in on the company's homepage and I updated the title tag and the description I optimized them for keywords that I thought we should be going after, right? And I didn't do anything crazy. They were actually very well written. I thought a lot about it, but I never thought to tell anybody that I was doing it. So I just went in, I made the change, and for whatever reason, for our branded search term, we disappeared from Google for a few hours, and the CEO lost it and was absolutely furious and made one of the other marketers come and stand over my shoulder and watch me change it back. And it was just, I don't know. I thought I was going to get fired. I don't know what I thought was going to happen, but I learned at that point probably, well, first of all, always be able to roll back any change that you ever make, which fortunately that was a pretty easy one to do. And maybe talk to someone before you go changing things on the website. I couldn't even change anything now at Under Armour without taking it up by committee, but it was a good place to learn and to make mistakes. And I was eventually hired away by a competitor, and I moved to the West Coast, which happened to be 2 hours south of Seattle. And MozCon is in Seattle. And I convinced my boss to send me to MozCon. And this would have been 2011 or 12. Yeah, 2012. And I had never been to a conference. I had never been around other SEOs ever. Like, I'd never really talked to another SEO aside from my time at Full Sail, and those were digital marketers. There was no one really specializing in SEO. And I walked into MozCon and I was like, oh, these are my people. Like, where have they been? Where have these people been? I just felt like I was in heaven.
Mm-hmm.
And I went every year for the next 3 or 4 years after that. And that was a time when MozCon was really exploding. Like, I think in 1 year, it went from 500 attendees 1 year to like 2,500 the next year. It exploded, and they had to put it in the convention center, and it became this big thing. And as part of those, part of the reason you go to conferences is to make connections with people, right? And I didn't know a single person in that room. And I just started talking to people, getting to know people. And I would go back the next year and I'd be like, hey, I saw you last year, and you just start to create these. The SEO community is wonderful about this. Yeah, maybe because we're so maligned by other marketers for so long, and we just we had to get scrappy, and they're very generous with their knowledge and their time. And we generally stick together and help each other. I still belong to a little group of people that I met at MozCon, and we have a small private Slack channel. There's 4 of us, literally 4 of us in there, and we, if we run into a problem we haven't seen before, or if we just want to shoot the breeze or whatever, we get in there and talk about things that we're seeing. And we've been friends now probably for 8-9 years, some of us. So it's been a long journey, an interesting journey, and never thought I would find anything I loved as much as music, but this definitely fits the bill. So that's my how I got to SEO story.
Got it. So I mean, you actually created your own little mastermind there, right? It's like it's 4 of you guys that you can rely on each other and like ask questions and come back to each other, and that's great. I mean, meeting people at conferences is somewhat pretty difficult. I mean, some people are pretty shy. I mean, what's maybe one networking tip that you can give out there for someone that wants to network when we start doing conferences again, that you can let someone know to meet these people or meet some other SEOs?
Yeah, so I did this thing. Everyone in SEO has an area, maybe an area of specialty, right? There are people who gravitate towards technical. And I thought it was really fun to see Dwayne Forrester in the earlier segment today, because I just talked to him literally 2 days ago for like an hour and a half. It was awesome. And I met Dwayne in Seattle years ago when he was still at Bing. Everybody has areas. So some people are more content focused. Some people work in agencies. Some people work in-house. Totally different way of working, right? I've done both. But before I was ever agency side, at MozCon, I realized, there's in-house SEOs and there's agency SEOs, and their work is very different, and how they're approaching work is very different. So what I did is I set up a meetup because I didn't know anybody, and this was just a beautiful thing. I set up a meetup at my favorite restaurant. I happen to have a favorite restaurant in Seattle. And I used a Facebook group to set up this meetup and schedule it in the restaurant. And the restaurant they were really cool. I called them and I said, I'm going to set up a meetup at your restaurant. I have no idea how many people are going to show up, and I don't know any of these people, and none of us have ever met each other, but we're going to see if this works. And so I set up this little group, and I thought, oh my God, nobody's going to come to this, right? And I was in-house SEO at the time, so I reached out to the Moz community, because they had a private Facebook group for MozCon, and I said, hey, anybody who's an in-house SEO, I'm setting up this meetup. Here's where it'll be. Here's the time. Please come and join us. Had no idea who would show up. Well, I get there that night, and I'm there, and a couple people show up. It was great. So we're chatting, right? A couple more people show up. We're all chatting. A couple more people show up. We have to add a table. And by the time we just added tables until we ran out of room, and we ended up having almost 20 in-house SEOs just casually getting together. And it was great because the conference didn't start till the next day. So when all those people who hadn't come knowing anybody to the conference, when they walked in the door that next morning, they knew somebody. They had talked to somebody the night before. And I didn't know if it was going to work or not. And I guess I'm more extroverted than the average person. And that, it probably took some guts to set that up and see, it could have failed miserably. I don't know. But I think what drove that is the year before had been my first year. And when I walked in the door, I didn't know anybody. And I thought, how nice would it be if I knew at least just one person when I come in? And it just made a huge difference. So I did that the next 2 years. I did it again. And then, of course, some of the agencies figured out that I was doing it and I was actually getting in-house SEOs to the table. And they're like, well, we want to get their business, right? So they started throwing parties the night before that were sponsored. And, so I guess I started a casual thing. But,
so it started there, huh? That's,
yeah. And so I think there's questions you can just ask as icebreakers, like, are you in-house? Are you agency? What types of SEO are you into? And I think it's just good to start with that, right? Start with what you know. And I always try to go around, and as hard as it is, it's really hard to just walk up to someone you don't know, right? And introduce yourself. But I try to go and force myself to just sit down at a table of people that I don't know, and then talk. It's just a wonderful opportunity to create relationships. You never know where that's going to take you. It can be quite magical. I remember sitting at a table and Marie, oh my gosh, what's her last name?
Haynes?
She's Canadian. She's got an agency. She's all over Google now as an SEO.
Marie Haynes.
Marie Haynes.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Marie. I'm sorry, I can't remember your last name. But it was before, her business exploded, and it was Marie Haynes and Zach Snap. I can't remember his last name. I was sitting at a table of a bunch of people who are now like big names in the industry, but at the time they weren't. And it's incredible to sort of watch people's careers progress. And there's a lot of room for that in SEO. It's a wonderful field for anybody who's thinking about getting into it. It's an incredible career path with lots of opportunity. It's great.
Yes. I mean, having, Dwayne on call anytime you want, that's awesome. I mean, you can go to him, ask questions. having Dwayne Forster, on speed dial, that's a great connection to have there, right? I mean, there's a few takeaways I got from that. I mean, you were able to use, something like you were able to target people within the in-house app or in-house group. So that's a great thing that people should realize. Like, if when the conference puts in together like a little mini social network, reach out to those people and create that event. I mean, that's so cool how I do know like a lot of companies now do host parties outside these conferences just for those things. But it's so cool knowing that you were doing this like way, way, way back in the days. Okay. So speaking of in-house and agency, you said you did both. Like, I'm curious, what are the two major differences that you see between in-house SEOs and agency SEOs?
They're very different.
Yeah.
And I spent about 8 years in-house, and then I went agent. Usually, most people start agency side and then go in-house. I went the other way, and it was very intentional on my part. I knew there were things that I would never learn if I stayed in-house, or would take me a really long time to learn. Agency side, you learn how to scale, right? You learn how to do things at scale, and how to do things maybe more efficiently, more quickly. You're around a lot. One of the benefits of being at an agency, if it's a really good agency, is that you're surrounded with other great people who do what you do. So, you know, there's if you're stuck on a problem, there's probably someone two doors down from you who's maybe seen that problem before, or there's assets already created. You don't have to start from scratch, and you've got templates for things. It can be really good for that. What agency work taught me more than anything else was communication skills, I think. You know, how and when to communicate. I tend to be, you probably already figured out, I'm verbose. I like to talk, and I talk a lot. And that's not always the best. It's, you know, if you're communicating with as an agency with someone's in-house developers, you have to learn how to be so clear in your direction, and concise, and make it so that there's no room for misunderstanding or misinterpretation. That was hard for me to learn. I had some great people around me to help me learn that. So I think obviously juggling clients is different than having just one client. And people who've worked agency side who've never been in-house, they all think that in-house is like posh and easy, right? Like they're like, I just want an easy in-house gig. I want one client. My life would be so much easier. And all the in-house people are like, oh my God, they have no idea, right? You know, they're different, and they're hard in their own ways. I like being in-house better, not because it's easier, but because I like doing things. I like, when I write requirements, I can actually either I'm working directly with the developers and the engineers, or sometimes I might write, I'm writing my own robots.txt file. I'm writing, I may be creating my own hreflang sitemaps. I like getting my hands dirty with some of that. And it was really hard as agency side. It's really hard to touch things. You're usually not allowed into Jira because they just assume you don't know what you're doing in Jira, and probably most of the time agency folks don't. But I just think they're whole different sets of problems. But I like being very hands-on, and so I think that makes in-house better for me, just as a career path kind of thing.
I'm with you there.
Yeah.
I mean, even Jeff Carpenter says here, you get to dig more into the data to make higher quality results when you don't have to hit hourly allotments. I mean, totally true, right?
Jeff, I know Jeff. Jeff and I used to work together. Hi, Jeff.
Hey, Jeff. I'm curious, everyone out there who, if you're an agency SEO or an in-house SEO, put it in the chat. I'm curious to see what you guys are doing. But okay, Jeff says hi there again. But I want to go off the topic of how you speak to developers. I actually found this slide online when I was doing some research. I believe it's from one of your presentations.
Oh, yeah. And I put this together, yeah.
I'm curious, talk a little more about this one right here, because I mean, you were talking about developers, and can this slide, I think it can pertain to both in-house and agencies?
Yeah, I think so. When I was agency side, I did have one client where I talked directly to the engineers. It took a long time to build that trust level where they finally believed that I knew what I was talking about. And it just takes time sometimes to develop that trust. Sometimes what really does it is if you do a project with them and you get an end result that's amazing, and you take that back to them and you say, look what we did together. Like, because of that thing that you changed, this is what happened. And I did that, closing that loop, right? That next to last bullet. That's the one thing. Oh, I'll take it back. It's the second bullet and the next to last bullet are the most requested things I get from engineers. If you go ask an engineer, how can I help you? How can I be a better SEO, write better requirements? How can we work better together? Like, what are you not getting from me that would help you do a better job when we're working together? One of the best things, and when I say write better requirements, usually it has to do with providing lots and lots of examples, right? So here's an example of how it is now or how it shouldn't be, right? And here's an example of how it should be. Here's another example of how it shouldn't be. Here's an example of how it should be. And then tell them why. Like, why is this example that's good, why is it good, and why is the example that's bad, right? And that's very, very important. And having more than one example. And the biggest pet peeve, and I've seen so many tickets written this way, whether it was my predecessors where I'm at now, or at other companies, or even when I was agency side. Don't ever, ever, ever copy a Google Developers Guide link and put it in your ticket and call it done and say that those are the requirements. It's disrespectful to the developers that you're working with. First of all, they shouldn't have to dig through that and find out what on earth is the requirement versus something else, right? So it is okay if the Google Developers Guide is really verbatim the requirements and you wouldn't change anything. I recently did this with Infinite Scroll. So the Google requirements were written. I would have just written exactly the same thing. So that's what I did. I copied and pasted verbatim into the ticket exactly the wording that I wanted. Yeah, it's the same words, but you're not making that engineer go dig through a link somewhere and try to decipher what out of that content is the requirement and what isn't, right? Don't make them work like that. That's just mean, And then closing that loop. The other thing is that we had I did this this happened to be an offshore developer. It doesn't matter if they're offshore developers or in-house developers. Closing the loop and letting them know what the impact was of something that they did totally builds relationship and buy-in. So the next time you go to them and say, hey, this is the requirement, this is what we have to do, it's going to be 10 times easier because they've already seen that they can have a positive result and that you're going to go back and loop them in on that. So we had errors that were sneaking in. I can't remember if it was structured data errors. I think it was structured data errors. Lots of them, like to the tune of 500,000. It was a lot of errors. And I can't remember offhand if it had to do with product reviews or, I can't remember specifically, but if you fix your structured data errors, you have a pretty clear visual of that from Google Search Console where you can see the errors coming down, right? And we immediately, the day we posted the fix, the errors dropped by 250,000, and then they continued to drop like precipitously down to almost nothing in 4 or 5 days' time. Right. And this was pre-holiday. So people were, really wanting to be ready for pre-holiday. So I took a screenshot of that and I sent it to the engineer and I CC'd their boss and I said, this was awesome. Like, this is what that fix that you did. And I put the ticket number. This is what happened. And that validation is so nice, right? And they just don't usually get that. And so the next time you go back, it's just going to be way easier to engage them and to get things done the way they need to be done.
I love that. I love that. Yes, I mean, giving credit where credit's due is very rewarding, especially for the person that did it, especially those developers. I mean, that's so cool. I mean, even Jeff says maybe even thanking them with a beer also encourages them more eagerness to help.
Beer, food, yeah, for sure. Food works every time. When I did this presentation at SMX, the other person on the stage was named Jenny, and she was from AutoZone, I think, and she was not an SEO by trade originally. She was an engineer that they grabbed from the engineering team and then trained in SEO. Which I thought was a really interesting approach. I don't know that I've ever seen a company take that approach. And I thought, wow, that's pretty smart. It's probably easier than going the other way. That's my guess. So, but the way she built rapport with her engineering team was she bought them pizza all the time. And it worked like a charm.
Never eat lunch alone, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so
never eat lunch alone. I have to do a shout out for that one. So that is a quote from a book by Jessica Bowman called The Executive SEO Playbook. I'm giving her a shameless pitch. It matches my color. So Jessica's awesome. We've used her for training. But yeah, that's a quote from her book, and it really is true. I eat lunch, well, right now I don't, but when we're in the office, I eat lunch with the engineers almost every day. So I know them as people, right? And that makes a huge difference for sure.
Everyone, I highly recommend that book. If you want to be getting into enterprise SEO consulting, Jessica Bowman's book is all about processes and the way you can build an in-house team. It's awesome. Definitely check it out. So I wanted to get into where you're at right now, and I'm curious, like, how is the team at Under Armour? I mean, do you have a whole team under you, or are you kind of like the quarterback where you work with the social team and the dev team, and and you're passing things around and putting things together, coming up with a plan? Tell me about the process at Under Armour.
So not atypical for enterprise level organizations. We are a very small team. Me and 3 direct reports, and that's one of them is an extern. We have a fabulous program that we do every year where we take someone. We can pitch to get someone from the call center. So we call them externs. So they're not people from outside of the company. They're actual folks from the call center. And then we write a job description for someone on our team. And then, usually I'll get 6 to 8 applicants for the gig. And then I pick someone, and we literally have the smartest people in our call center. I used to work in call centers when I was in college. I didn't work with people nearly this smart. They're amazing. They're all just incredible. And so this is the third extern I've had, and that's sort of, I usually mentor that person. They're not usually somebody who knows anything about SEO. And then so 3 other full-time SEOs. But it's if you think about the fact that we have 450 Google Search Console profiles, it's a little daunting.
So tell me a little more about that. What are the 450 different properties there? Like, is it like all different brands?
Yeah. So we're in 35 countries, right?
Okay.
And so you've got all of those, plus, as any enterprise organization goes, you have all of the websites that aren't e-com, right? So we have our newsroom site, the about.underarmour.com, a careers site, other microsites, it's all it's all we can do to corral the desire to build microsites everywhere. And it's a lot. And we recently this year migrated North America from a proprietary platform to Salesforce Commerce Cloud. And I'll actually be speaking a little bit about that with the Bodify folks in a couple of weeks. And a migration is always a big deal. It's especially a big deal when it's an enterprise level organization and an old site, right? An old legacy site that's been there for 14 years and God knows what's out there, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So that can go off the rails really easily. So my first 2 years at Under Armour were really devoted to making sure that went right. That was primarily the focus of everything that I did. And we migrated in July, and it went really well. It went probably better than any migration I've ever been part of. And that's a great tribute. We had a great team. And the fact that we pulled it off during having to work from home, everybody's remote, it was extraordinary. It was a really incredible feeling. And I had some great partners. Obviously we have external partners and things like that too to support us. But I think that the challenge at having a small team at such a big organization, and this is true for most enterprise level, although I think it varies quite a bit. I mean, I've talked to enterprise companies that have anywhere from 2 SEOs to 18 or 20 SEOs, and it seems to range all over the map, depending on their model. Are they all in-house? Do they have external partners? Things like that. The key, regardless, is to understand that 80% of what affects SEO and what is going to impact whether or not SEO goes well or badly, 80% of that is happening outside of the SEO team. And making sure, that you are educating, communicating, advocating, evangelizing the appropriate folks. And what I tell people on other teams is I tell them, you're doing SEO. You're doing SEO all the time, whether you know it or not. For better or worse. The decision you make could be really great for SEO, it could be really terrible for SEO. But you're doing SEO one way or another. And I think having people realize that and just raising the awareness to the point where they know, hey, I think this thing that we want to do has SEO implications. We should go talk to someone from the SEO team and loop them in on this conversation, right? You need that radar. You need those feelers out in the organization. Otherwise, stuff's just going to fly and you're not going to have any idea, and you'll be running cleanup most of the time. And we still do that a lot. I mean, we're in the infancy. Under Armour is not an inherently digital first organization, which is not. It's not the core of who we are. We didn't start. We're not TripAdvisor or Stitch Fix or any of these companies that started either as an app or as a digital first organization. We started out of Kevin Plank's grandma's basement where he was making t-shirts. So it wasn't, it's not a digitally inherent organization. And so I think we're in the process of learning and building that as time goes by. And it's exciting to see. It's exciting to be part of that.
Yes. Okay, let's see here. Before we go, I mean, like, if there's any questions before my last question, I want to see if there's anyone in chat that wants to say, ask a question. We're here for you. If you have any SEO questions, enterprise SEO questions, we would love to answer them. Dana, so I wanted to ask you about your most recent presentation or speaking gig was with Spotify, and it was like avoiding SEO disasters and like learn the right way. I'm curious, what was like one big takeaway from that one? I mean, I'm curious, like, what are some disasters that you've like really learned from? I mean, we heard about your change the title tag and the brand tag. That's one of them for sure.
Yeah. So can we just talk robots.txt file? Like,
okay.
First of all, if you can, in any platform that you're in, lock down, and I said this at the Spotify conference too, and it's really funny because we had an issue the day after I said this on the Spotify call. We had an issue with our robots.txt file and somebody touching it who shouldn't have. And what I said on the Spotify call is lock down your robots.txt file. No one should be touching that file who isn't an SEO, period. End of story. Maybe that's more not possible in certain systems, right? In Salesforce, you can set permissions by field. So I asked our administrator to lock it down so that only folks from the SEO team could touch it.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, one of our very well-meaning engineers went and twisted the admin's arm and said, it's after hours and we really need to make this change. And it had to do, we were getting overcrawled by Google. And we could see it in the logs. We knew we were getting overcrawled by Google. But the question is, like, you need to get to the why of that. And what we found was something had been developed that wasn't developed very efficiently. The code was not efficient. It was slowing things down tremendously. It was just slowing all the pages down. I don't even know if it was like a module in our CMS. I don't even know what it was. It was just a piece of code that was slowing things down. And when Google was trying to crawl, of course, it was slowing Google down too, just like everything else. I mean, Google wasn't being treated differently. It was just experiencing the same thing everyone else was experiencing. So instead of fixing the code and doing it right and going back and saying, wow, we maybe didn't develop that in the best way and it should be more efficient, they come to the SEO team and say, oh, Google's overcrawling the site, so we need to lower the crawl rate in Google Search Console down to as low as possible. And then they also added blocked a bunch of files via robots.txt that shouldn't be blocked, and didn't tell us until a few days later. And so probably at least 3 or 4 times in various different sites in different places. I've dealt with well-meaning engineers. They think they're doing something good, and they add or take something out of the robots.txt file, and it just creates problems. And it's because they just don't inherently understand the ramifications of what they're doing. And this whole concept that you can go to Google Search Console and slow your crawl rate is not even Google says it's a good idea, right?
Yeah.
They flat out say that's not a good idea. And I pushed back. I pushed back really hard on Salesforce. It was actually Salesforce in one instance coming to us saying, you need to slow your crawl rate down all the way to the lowest. And I said, no, we're not going to do that. Mm-hmm. We don't have enough information. I said, what if Google's just crawling the homepage 50 million times? That's slowing the crawl rate's not going to solve that problem, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think it's, lock down your robots.txt file. If you're not a technical SEO, and not everybody is, not everybody knows what to do with their robots.txt file, hire someone for an hour or two to help you sort it out and get it right. And just understand, robots.txt files are not set and forget. They do change over time. And they can morph as the site changes or whatever. But it's really important not to let people, engineers shouldn't be touching it. I love them, they're good at what they do, but unless it's an engineer who's also an SEO, they really shouldn't be in there. That's my advice.
There you go. You have it. Yes, I'm so for. I mean, like, yes, robots.txt is a very, very important file, especially to SEOs. And some of you guys may not realize that it's just a small, simple file, but it can do a lot to a website.
Yeah.
Okay, so we actually got one question in here. Let's say it says, "What role does link building play in enterprise SEO?" What do you think? How that? I mean,
yeah, it's really, really good question. Most of my clients have been, enterprise level. I worked with Samsung and NetApp while I was agency side. I mean, they get millions of links, right? You don't even have to try.
Yeah.
You've got whole teams, you've got social media teams, you've got brand teams, you've got PR teams, you've got your athletes, you've got, other advocates for your brand. For us, it happens to be Dwayne Johnson, right? Who's tweeting about us on Instagram and linking to us. Links are the least of our worries. What we do have to worry about is backlink quality, right? So I think if you're an enterprise level organization, it's not worrying about how many links do you have. It's like, are you getting nefarious links? Are you getting bad links from bad players, bad neighborhoods, and just being on top of that, right? We have issues of that in some places and not in others. It also depends on the ratio, right? You're always going to get some toxic links. When you have millions and millions and millions of backlinks, there's always going to be some toxic links in there. If the ratio is really, really small and your competitors are kind of in that same ballpark, right? You probably don't need to worry about it too much, but I think it is something that you need to just to safeguard the brand, and the reputation is something you should look at on a regular basis, probably at least once a month, I would say, just to make sure things aren't going south and you haven't got, a bunch of links from a bad place.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, the follow-up question here was, so most of it, if it's about on-page and redistributing link use internally and disavowing, are you disavowing any of these links that are toxic that you find, or are you just kind of just, you got it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we maintain a disavow file and update it on a regular basis. Yeah, I think that's just a good thing to do in general.
We have, Jeff says, I haven't seen a valid need for a disavow file in years. I mean, I personally will disavow files for some clients. Just, I mean, yes, so you can see toxic links. I mean, if you can see it's toxic, you can.
Yeah, it's pretty obvious.
Yeah, it's pretty obvious.
And we all, it's just quicker to disavow by domain, right? Like, it's be ridiculous to go link by link. I haven't had an actual need for it as an SEO since I was agency side years ago, and I was working in the very highly competitive coupon/affiliate space, and someone, I won't tell you the client or who I thought the perpetrator was, but prior to holiday, someone built millions of toxic backlinks to the #1 most profitable page on this particular site, and it wasn't removed from Google, but it was sandboxed. So this page had ranked #1 or 2 in Google for Best Buy coupons, and it disappeared. And that was a money page for them. It was worth millions of dollars. And right before Black Friday, it disappeared. And when you Googled the brand that the site was, plus not Black Friday, but Best Buy coupons, their Mother's Day page was showing, like all the wrong pages were ranking, which was a clue to us that something was astray. And that page had, I think it had 40 million backlinks. So we had to go through all of them and disavow. We were disavowing about 100,000 at a time because it was a lot, and we weren't even really sure that this was the problem. So it was super hard to sell to the client because we're like, we think this is what it is, but we don't know. And they let us go ahead and try it. And after we had disavowed about the first 250,000, we started to see the right page started to rank again. We were definitely doing the right thing. It never actually got back up to where it was. I think it was artificially there because of some of the backlinks that were there, but it recovered back to top 5, I think, position. That's the last time a disavow file, and that was years ago. That was probably 6 or 7 years ago.
Got it.
So yeah.
Yeah. So Vincent, I mean, how much negative SEO is happening in enterprise SEO? It's happening, right? I mean, it's there, definitely there. And
it happens. Yeah.
So, I mean, I want to be conscious of your time. I want to ask you one last question. What I ask all my SEO professionals is like, what is one advice that you would give to someone that wants to get into SEO? Like, how can they learn more about SEO? What would be that one advice?
Oh gosh. Start your own website. That would be my, get a WordPress site. I don't care what platform, maybe some are better than others. You'll find out your own problems. But if you start your own blog, you start your own website and you start digging around in there and having to do things, that's the best way to learn. That's really how I got into it. And almost all the SEOs I know, at some point, that was part of their learning journey, was having their own website and having to work on it, being very hands-on, right? Even the extern I have right now from the call center has her own blog. So right away, she's like picking up things because she can go and dig around in the code on her own site, and she can play with it and make mistakes, and no one's going to get mad at her, yell at her, It's having your own site is just a great way to start. Yeah.
Got it. Okay, so how can someone get a hold of you? Where do you play most of the time? Are you on Twitter, LinkedIn? How can anyone get a hold if they want to reach out to you?
Yeah. I'm almost never on Facebook anymore. I'm not much of an Instagram person unless it's food related. Same for Pinterest, but Dana Tan SEO on Twitter. And sometimes I tweet SEO stuff. Sometimes I tweet food stuff. Sometimes it's just random stuff. Sometimes it's political stuff. I'll warn you.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Dana. I'm going to sign off here. Please hold on so I can say bye to you like appropriately, but let me go ahead and sign off on the show right here real quick.
Yeah.
Let me see here. Bye.
Yeah.
All right. All right, guys. There you have it. Another episode of the SEO Video Show with Dana Tan, Senior Manager of Global SEO at Under Armour. Thank you, everyone, for coming by. Shar, Jeff, Vincent, Ray, Elizabeth, Tim, Freddie, Kenneth, everyone, thank you for coming by. Be sure to come by next week. It's at a special time. It's the day after Thanksgiving, but my guest is not from the U.S., so he doesn't celebrate Thanksgiving, so go ahead and check that out. Again, thank you. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you get notified when we go live. All right.
Thank you for watching. Hope you come back next week. Make sure to subscribe. You don't want to miss a thing. Hope you learn something new, cause the vibe is incredible. From the special SEO professionals, SEO video show. Let's work. Want to see you be an SEO expert. Paul Andre DeVera helping you step it up. No delay right now. Time to level up. Hey, thank you so much for watching. Make sure to subscribe. Woo!